We now go to the round table with Heimen, Niek, Yvette. There they come.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning. I think we're all present out there.
There we go.
All right. Thank you, Wouter, for that. Hello, everyone. I'm Derrek, Clarke, and I'll be moderating your roundtable today for the future of smart cities. On the panel, we have the keynote presenter, Heimen Visser, who's the Fund Director for Communications Infrastructure and Smart Cities at Primevest. We also have Yvette Entius, who is the Program Manager for Digital Innovation in Smart Cities in Den Haag. And we have Niek de Jong, who is the former CEO of Sustainder, a smart outdoor lighting solutions provider from the Netherlands. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this roundtable panel.
Thank you.
All right. I guess to get started, I have a question for you, Yvette, here. I understand that in Den Haag, you guys have a very robust smart city program going on, and last week you had the rolling out of several aspects of that. Can you tell us a little bit about the program that you have to make Den Haag into a smart city?
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, we have. Of course, like every other city, we are trying to prepare us for future. And we would like to see what all the technologies and digital innovations can do for us with all the challenges we have in the city. And because it's still a very unknown area, we decided to build a living lab in a neighborhood in Scheveningen. It's called. It's close to the beach, part of The Hague. And we consider that living lab as a simulator for the city of the future. So that means that we can test all kinds of technologies over there, but we also face lots of questions. We have legal questions, for example, like license or privacy issues or governance issues even. So for us, it's a very interesting testing area where we do not have an entire influence on that part, because it's not like tests doing at technical university. This is just real life. So for us, it's a very interesting area. And last week, that area was officially opened. And now we have several tests going on already, and we learned a lot about it. And we had all kinds of dialogues with citizens to see where their concerns are or what their ideas are to make it a better city. So lots of challenges we have on mobility, parking problems, noise reduction, protection of nature, safety at sea. We have many issues we want to test and see what a digital revolution can mean for that.
Great, thank you. It sounds like also just based on what you were just talking about, especially with the noise reduction, looking at environment and everything, that you guys have a good handle on kind of achieving a smart city plan, looking at some of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals that Heimen mentioned in his keynote presentation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Another question as well. Do you differentiate in your approach towards supporting the development of smart public spaces as opposed to, say, development of smart buildings in particular?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of similarities. I think the key issue is that you combine all kind of data together, but you also use the limited space in a very smart way. And the way The Hague does it is that we start with the area development. We include all the digital challenges and the digital infrastructure in that, and then we can, that is the basic infrastructure, so to say, and only later on we would like to see what the users need. And I think there's a lot of similarities, because that's what I understand for smart buildings as well. You look at it and you investigate what the user of the building wants, how you can include their wishes in the constructions and in all the services that are there. Although I think that a city is a bit more complex, because like what I said before, we can't rule everything and we can't steer everything. So lots of things happen unexpectedly, and that forces us to be very creative as well.
And Nick, what about you, kind of playing off of the same question there? What are your thoughts towards the differentiations between approaching, say, a smart city plan and a plan for a smart building development?
Well, both are confronted with the same problem, and that is that the smart technology is developing much faster than the infrastructure the changes are taking. For instance, like the previous speaker Derrek said, we're talking about years where infrastructure changes or making new buildings that takes years and years, 10 years easily. So that's a problem we face. So that's why I think both in buildings and in the outdoor, we should prepare the infrastructure with modular systems like the hub Heimen mentioned in his keynote, which are flexible and can adopt to new technologies whenever there is a need for new technologies, but more important even, that can adopt to new needs. If we develop new needs, for instance, 1 year ago, measurement of social distance outside was no need whatsoever, but today it might be, because we want to see if the cities are too busy or not with the pandemic. So a modular approach to be able to adopt the infrastructure in the building or in the outdoor to new technologies or new needs, that's, I think, where it comes together very much, and also where the difficulty is.
Nice. And then just continuing along that kind of thought of looking at adopting new technologies, Nick, can you walk us through, say, some of the critical technology considerations that are required to realize a smart city plan, especially looking at some of the infrastructure requirements?
Well, I think the most important thing is that you should think about that early on when you are still planning. And that when you make your vision on how your infrastructure should look like, because that's the moment you can integrate this modular approach. What I see in daily practice, and I saw also when I was heading Sustainder, is that, for instance, the street lights, which are now tendered, although we all agree to what Heimen says, that it should be modular and could be the base for the smart city, I think 90% of all tenders we receive for smart lighting are just a copy, almost a copy of the last one. So so if you want to adopt that, the technology is not so much the issue, but it is the issue that a city should start and integrate the thinking about the smart city when it's planning the outdoor, and then integrate some key elements into the tender book, which they're going to send out. For instance, it should be modular, it should be future-proof, and they're all kind of not too difficult, but important things you should add in the tender. And then you get a good proposal from the suppliers. And I think that is not what's happening today, and that's why we still today, not in The Hague, well, maybe it's Scheveningen not, but it might be in the other parts of The Hague, it might be still the case, that we are not investing in the right infrastructure from my point of view.
And also keeping along that, I have a feeling that with some of the tenders you're going through, it may be under the assumption that, oh, we're just going to put out a tender or a request for proposal for a street light, and then we're going to get those lights and we're just going to put it into the ground and everything's going to work and it's going to be fine. But that's not really the case. There's actually a segment of infrastructure that has to be thought of, and it has to be put in place, kind of the underground works as well, that's really going to support what you want to do above ground. Can you talk a little bit more about that as well?
Well, I think I can do that, but I think even it might be Yvette being the better one to talk about it, because I think that's what she just did in Scheveningen, and it took a lot of years, but I think they're now reached a great point where you really integrate the thinking about the future use into the planning of the whole new infrastructure. And I think that's really a good way to go. So you have the expert in the room. So you can ask me, but you can also ask Yvette. I think that's really a line-out project for the smart city in the Netherlands, to be honest.
Yeah, well, maybe to continue, indeed, that's what we did. We have experience now that it is the best way of doing it is working in five layers. And first is indeed the cables, etc., under the ground. That is the basic infrastructure. And then there's another layer, which is the smart hub, which can be everything that is already on the street, regular objects like banks or waiting booths or street lights or a kiosk or whatever. And the third layer is the data, of course, that is collected. The fourth layer is the cloud, and the last layer is the use of it, like vehicles or sensoring or cameras or whatever. And it is interlinked with each other. So we will always look at all these 5 layers if we change everything. And that's why it's indeed a modular system. If something is changed, it has effect on one of the other layers. So that's how we try to include it indeed in the planning already when we plan to start a new area development. And we also hope that by doing this, it will also be easier to scale up, because what we learned over the past few years is very useful. And indeed, we used the experience on lights in that area to formulate a tender for another area in the city in a different way, exactly the way that Niek just described. So for us, it's an enormous learning environment.
And maybe to add to that, I'm sorry, this seems very obvious and easy, but I know it's not easy because I've talked to hundreds of municipalities in the past 4 years. And I think the number of municipalities who take this approach I can count it on one hand. And then I'm talking of Dutch and German municipalities. Then maybe Heimen, I'm wrong, or Yvette, maybe you see different, but I think it's really, it's great what you're doing, but I think we should spread the news.
Yeah, fully right. Yeah.
And Heimen, I think that's actually a great segment into a particular question for you. So looking at what Yvette just walked us through in kind of the stack that's required, looking at these smart outdoor lighting solutions, and then also looking at development of smart cities in general. What type of funding options are out there for municipalities that you're seeing? How are they going about funding these different types of programs?
Yeah. Now let's start with the following, because the question that you're asking is often not asked. Usually a municipality, when they would like to do a transition to implement new technology, they look at their current budget and they say, does it fit in the current budget? If not, it stops. Point. What we do, and we already helped more than 45 municipalities in the Netherlands by making a business case and look at the different funding models that you have. Because you can apply for a EU subsidy in Brussels, for example, which is a really long-term application process, and the speed is often not the best point. You can go to private equity, but private equity has a completely different risk return profile, which is usually not suitable for a public entity or a municipality. Short-term and high returns. You can look to institutional investors. We use them a lot, those institutional investors, for also investing in our fiber to the home strategy, because they have a way longer term in which they look into their investments of 15 to 20 years, and especially for smart city and making them more sustainable cities. We use the model together with the BNG Bank. And quite some advantages of the BNG Bank are zero solvency financing leads to very low interest rates, which is very interesting and makes it affordable for a municipality. But second is the ownership issue, because there's one thing that municipalities are really afraid of is losing the ownership and control of their public infrastructure. Yeah. And in the model, by financing and getting BNG Bank involved, this issue is fully covered, while the ownership of the assets stay with the municipality.
And I think the interesting thing about this concept, Heimen, is that you are not claiming the data.
No, nothing at all.
What municipalities are weary of, that they will lose control of the data, and that's not what you do. You just finance the infrastructure, and
exactly.
also of the data really stays with the municipality.
Yeah, no, thank you for the addition. The model is just like a real estate object. We're just renting out the object itself, but the service that is provided is done by a third company or third partner in really close cooperation together with the municipality, and also within all the boundaries for privacy regulations, GDPR, etc., etc.
Nice, thank you for that. And one more question here for the panel, last question to close out this session. And this one, I'll start with you, Yvette. Looking at what we've just talked about with development of smart cities, what do you think municipalities should do differently to overcome some of the challenges they're facing? Heimen just spoke about some of the funding challenges. What other options are there out there to overcome some of the planning and process challenges?
I think there are plenty, because it's a very complicated topic, especially when you want to scale up. I still find it very difficult to share knowledge within the cities, because there is a lot of knowledge, and I know that there, especially the biggest cities in the Netherlands, have a lot of other knowledge that they can share with us, but still very difficult to do. I think we still have to grow with our knowledge about digitalization, what it can do for us, really understand what it is about, what the technology is. But I think there's also a challenge on the governance side within the organization itself, integrated finance instead of separate finance, for example. And it means also it's a different way of working, because it starts becoming so complex that there's not just one person who can be in charge of everything. You really need to work in multidisciplinary teams with all the knowledge combined, and there's still room for growth, I think.
Perfect. And Heimen, any final words?
Yeah, just maybe one point. I think one of the main important things is, and it's also in addition to what Niek spoke earlier about, is lessons learned. Mm-hmm. And how do municipalities learn from each other? I think almost 20% of my time is spent by connecting municipalities together and see what their lessons learned are. And see what they can, what they can better perform.
Perfect. And Niek?
Because I know you said that were Heimen's final words, but could I add two things which are really on the tip of my tongue?
Sure.
So one is maybe a bit bold, but what I would like to say that the municipalities say to their light managers, they forbid them to issue new tenders where there was not spoken to the planning department, because then we avoid these awful tenders with stupid luminaires. And the second thing is we should realize that the smart city is a cross-silo thing. So it's not for lighting or for environment or for building. It's a cross-silo. So the municipality should really assign somebody like Yvette with mandate to act on behalf of the municipality. And then we're going to make a step forward.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank you each, Niek, Heimen, and Yvette, for joining us today for the roundtable on the future of smart cities. And for all the attendees that are here, please stay tuned for another keynote from Esther Ann, who's representing the City of Singapore.